Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Carly P. Riley Show, where we have talked in the past about the TikTok ban on this program. And we're talking about it again today because I still feel like I'm taking crazy pills on this one a little bit with the discourse that I am seeing online about it. And when I feel that way, I want to talk more about it. So look, I want to start here. I'll give you the quick background. I am sure people know about this by now, but if you are not, the House of Representatives passed a bill that would allow Congress, the US government, to ban TikTok. It's not like a full-on ban, though some say it is. I talked about it on a program recently. You can go check that out if you want a little bit more of the backstory there, which I get into in that moment. What I want to start with today, though, is in the lead up to this House vote, certain users, when they logged onto TikTok, when they opened the app, were prompted to input their zip code, at which point they were provided with the phone number for their congressman, and they were told to call their congressman and protest this TikTok ban because there was this infringement of rights happening and TikTok was going to be banned and they needed to go and call their congressman. Now, I did not get this notification. And what seems to be the case is that perhaps because the user base of TikTok skews young, or perhaps for something that feels even more nefarious than that, children or young people, teenagers, were primarily the folks who were being prompted with this. At least anecdotally, everything I've seen, the adults I know who are on TikTok did not get this notification, but adults I know who have children who are on TikTok, their children did get this notification. So TikTok was prompting users in a very direct, clear call to action way, getting their zip code, having them call their congresspeople to take action about something that presumably most of the teenagers on TikTok do not have a complete or full picture of at all. I find this concerning because when we talk about TikTok, we are talking about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And this seems to be where there is the biggest divide between me and a lot of people in my comments. There is either a disbelief or an avoidance of the fact that TikTok and the CCP are inevitably very entwined with one another. Or there is the belief that somehow China will not exploit that relationship. But to me, it's just a common sense thing. To believe that China is not, or, and I think this is the bigger point, or would not use TikTok as a propaganda tool is to believe that, again, an authoritarian regime that exerts very tight control over every aspect of Chinese life and Chinese businesses would for some reason exempt the most powerful propaganda tool they have at their disposal, foreign propaganda tool certainly, would exempt that from the way they conduct themselves in every other aspect of their life and their business and their policy and their politics. That to me is categorically a more absurd thing to believe that they will not use this as a propaganda tool. They will not use this to spread anti-American hate, whether they're doing it now or in the future, whatever, that they would not, or even not anti-American, pro-Chinese, whatever it is they're trying to do, whatever political aim they may have. To believe that they will not use TikTok to that aim feels so much wilder to believe than that they will. And I kind of feel like people maybe just don't fully understand the way the Chinese system works. I want to read to y'all from the 2023 Human Rights Watch report on China. Quote, through laws and regulations, criminal punishment, harassment, intimidation, and the use of technology, the Chinese government operates one of the world's most stringent censorship regimes. Are you a right-winger that's pissed that you couldn't post anti-vax ideas on YouTube without getting delisted or getting knocked in some way? Or are you a left-winger who absolutely hates Musk's Twitter? Well, wait till you get a load of China, folks. In April, authorities released Wuhan businessman Fang Bin, who was among the first to report on the COVID-19 outbreak after 3 years in detention for reporting on the COVID outbreak in early 2020. This person was detained for 3 years. But Shanghai-based activist and former lawyer Zhang Zhan, who went to Wuhan to report on the outbreak in February of 2020, remains in custody. So other people who just reported on the COVID outbreak, are still in jail. In August, a court in Guizhou, I'm sorry, pronouncing that wrong, province, sentenced former economics professor Yang Xiaozhang to 4.5 years in prison for, quote, inciting subversion after he raised concerns about the high annual cost of government personnel in China. You don't like that Nancy Pelosi seems to be the best stock trader in the world? world. You find it suspicious that people who are in Congress who clearly are privy to information about various companies and what's going to happen within those companies from a regulatory perspective, that they can also trade stocks. Do you like to be able to openly criticize that? Because obviously that's patently absurd. You can't do things like that in China. You can't criticize the upper echelons of the party or call into question the annual cost of their salaries without getting apparently 4.5 years in prison for that, at least in Jeju province. Here's another broad paragraph from this Human Rights Watch report. 10 years into President Xi Jinping's rule, repression deepens across the country. The Chinese government continues its abusive policies against Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in Xinjiang. Sorry, I can't pronounce these things. Those who contact family and friends abroad or who advocate for their culture, language, and religion risk being treated as separatists and have been given harsh prison sentences. Across China, the government is further tightening social controls. There is no independent civil society. Even small pockets of freedom are eliminated. And look, I say all this not to say like, oh, China's so bad. I would love to go visit China. I think there's beautiful things that come out of China, Chinese culture, certainly, Chinese businesses. But I am trying to say that if you believe the government that is behind all of that is described in that way, would not use TikTok as a propaganda tool, I truly don't know what else to say. I think that is unbelievably naive position to hold. And then people will comment things to me like, oh, so you think France should ban US social media apps? What are we talking about? First of all, France and the United States are allies. In this moment in time, I would not necessarily call China an enemy of the United States. I think we're trying to have like a slightly better relationship. China's economy is struggling a bit. You know, we need each other as trade partners. I would love to have a productive, peaceful relationship with China. So I wouldn't call them an enemy, but I would not call them an ally. I would not call them our friends as I would France and the United States. And then also, again, the United States is different than China. And it feels like that's something that has gotten lost in this, or like that is a controversial opinion, or that it is so in vogue, frankly, on both sides of the aisle in this day and age, to be critical of the United States and to dislike things about our system, of which there are many things to dislike, or about which there are many things to dislike, that we have fully lost the plot on the fact that we are still allowed a tremendous number of freedoms, that this is still an amazing country that is freer and for that reason, in my opinion, better than many other systems that exist in the world. Which brings me to the next thing that I keep hearing is Meta. And I don't know if this comes from the fact that Trump has done this about face, and Trump said, well, now I'm pro TikTok because if you ban TikTok, that'll only help Schmuckersburg or whatever. Like, it'll only help Mark Zuckerberg, and he now hates Zuckerberg, I guess, apparently. And so maybe that's why people are saying this. And I can't believe I have to say this, but Mark Zuckerberg is not China. To compare Facebook to TikTok is like comparing a hunting rifle to a military grade tank in terms of the actual threat that these things pose. I could grant you every theory you have about how evil Mark Zuckerberg is, some of which might be true, many of which are probably not. But we could contend that every bad theory about Mark Zuckerberg and how bad he is true, maybe outside of him being like a literal alien or something. And the CCP's record would still be demonstrably worse than what Mark has done in the world in terms of human rights, freedoms, liberties, etc. Which is to say nothing of the fact that like Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have nuclear weapons at his disposal. He is not enslaving and genociding Uyghurs in Menlo Park. I mean, the categorical difference here is so stark to me that it is bizarre that this is a conversation we're having. And it is also strange to me that we don't have more politicians, public figures, in my opinion, standing up and making this distinction. And I don't know if it's because it's almost so obvious to the people who would say it that they don't feel the need to say it, or if, again, it's trying to feed into this popular feeling that like America sucks, which it does for a whole bunch of reasons. It still is not equivalent to authoritarian regimes in which you have a one-party system and there's no real legitimate dissent or debate allowed. But I feel like there's this criticism like, oh, you're just saying China's bad and therefore we shouldn't allow its app in here. No, what I've said pretty clearly is I absolutely think this is a country that would be interested in spreading propaganda, influencing elections, influencing American sentiment in any number of ways, and that they would not at all hesitate to use TikTok for that purpose. And me talking about the way that their rule of law exists right now is all in service of making that point. But we also do have a record that pretty clearly, to my mind, indicates that they have lied up to this point about how they have used TikTok. They obviously claim that, oh no, they don't pass any data back to us. We don't ask for data. The data are stored in centers in Austin, Texas. And then you have, for example, a former ByteDance executive coming forward and saying, oh no, that's not true. No, obviously data gets passed back to the CCP. By the way, it is a law in China that companies must share all data with the CCP. So by law, ByteDance is required to do that. Now, ByteDance claims, oh, China's never asked us for this data, whatever. Okay, you have this former ByteDance executive who said in a legal filing that China had used data from TikTok to find and identify Hong Kong protesters. I don't know if you followed that element. Hong Kong wants to be independent from China. China controls Hong Kong at this point. They want Hong Kong to stay under their jurisdiction. There's tension. There's protests in Hong Kong that China then cracks down on. In any case, data from TikTok was used for this purpose, at least according to a legal filing from a former ByteDance executive. And again, to me, it's a question of what is harder to believe. Is it harder to believe an authoritarian regime that requires all of the companies within its border to share data with it, and that is very restrictive and cracks down on dissenting speech or protests or anything, or puts people in jail simply for criticizing their salary caps or whatever, right? That is it harder to believe that group of people would find a way to use data or to propagandize the American people, or that they wouldn't do it? It is so cut and dry to me in terms of what feels easier to believe versus harder to believe. And again, it's kind of weird to me that we have to have this conversation. And my concern truly is actually more on the propaganda side than it even is on the data side, because I do think that data is so pervasive and out there at this point that it is possible to get your hands on data regardless, and that there are probably foreign state actors from all sorts of countries that are in all of our big tech companies acquiring this data, leaking it back to their home countries, anyway. But I don't think the problem with that is completely zero by any means. But look, this topic gets people riled up, and I know people just really don't agree with me on this. So let me give the less controversial take, which is banning TikTok would just be trade reciprocity. Right now, China bans Facebook, Instagram, Google, X, all of our social media platforms. From a reciprocal trade perspective, it makes every sense in the world to ban their social media platform. By the way, there are elements of this bill, the way it's written, that I maybe do have concerns with, and I would love being rewritten. But my bigger point here is actually about supporting the idea of having to divest TikTok from Chinese owners. In any case, this bill says that ByteDance, the current Chinese-owned parent company of TikTok, has 6 months to sell TikTok off essentially to American owners, American investors. Their argument would be 6 months is not enough time. We'll never be able to make it happen that fast. Who even could buy something of our size and scale? There are very few tech companies, very few companies that are so big that they would actually be able to buy something like TikTok, which is worth billions upon billions of dollars. And the US tech companies that have the money to actually buy something like TikTok will likely face regulatory scrutiny over buying it because of antitrust concerns. You've got Lena Khan in the FTC right now who would be regulating on an antitrust basis, and she has a very strong hand on antitrust. She goes after companies for far less egregious antitrust concerns than something like a Meta, or even perhaps an Apple buying something like TikTok. So TikTok's point is this is de facto a ban. Yes, this is presenting like it's all about divesting TikTok, but this is actually a ban. And I understand that argument. And I truly am not actually somebody who wants to see TikTok banned, though again, TikTok cannot be booted off of your phone. So the 170 million Americans, or whatever it is, might not be that high, but however many Americans have TikTok on their phone right now, they're not going to lose access to it. So I do think ban is a bit of a misnomer in that case. But anyways, they're saying it would be essentially a de facto ban because we won't be able to sell this company in 165 days. I am not so convinced of that. There is so much money to be made on TikTok. TikTok is such a powerful, powerful app. It has embedded itself so deeply into the fabric of our society at this point in lightning speed. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I think there's a lot of money to be made on this company. And when that is the case, somehow people figure it out and find a way to keep the company alive, let's call it. And so personally, I think that there's a good chance that what I view as the best possible outcome from all of this occurs, which is this bill gets passed, again, with the asterisk being that there are elements of this bill that I think it's maybe a little bit too broadly written, but that's not really the topic for today. And so something gets passed such that TikTok can be quote unquote banned. And either it gets divested, it gets sold within the next 6 months per the bill, or it takes a little bit longer. But one way or another, American ownership, there ends up being American ownership over TikTok. And therefore, the company, the app is allowed to continue, it is allowed to prosper. We all can benefit from what is an amazing app that I love and enjoy so very much. So I don't want to see it gone, but simultaneously, we can all be a bit safer and we can have a much more reciprocal trade dynamic with China vis-a-vis social media. All right, folks, come at me, hit me with it. I know you hate this opinion. Some of you, this is actually, by the way, like a majority opinion, but for some reason online, people really hate this opinion. But come at me, hit me in the comments. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys next time.